Revealing the hidden formats in Genesis. This is part 10 of the editing to find the format. And what I'm going to do is pull it up here and this one here, get me involved. And hopefully my video is finally not all jaggy around the edges. I'm really sorry for that. I got a new camera and I played around and I thought it was okay. It looked okay on screen, but I didn't look at anything after I taped it and come back. So it should be without all this fuzzy, except for on the very top of my head where my hair is so rather thin. I wanted to continue about this necklace that's on his neck. And Egypt had a great big gold necklace. It's not just like a chain or anything. When you search the web, you'll find it, and you got to remember, he's going to be wearing that at all times. And then, like right here, they had him ride in a chariot, and they proclaimed before him to bow their knee or bow their knee, and then they proclaimed Joseph's power, not his permission, but his power. So I guess it needs to be this way. And because I get to change the names to help us all out to pronounce the names a little bit better than what they had, even though pate or patai, potai, anyways, and I didn't want him to be of the priest. Their priest remained single. They all had to have this meditation practice onto the female goddess. That's the whole thing. That's why you see so many pictures of human bodies with animal heads. Those are all meaning that they had this practice of meditating to have a sex with the so-called female goddess. And if you're hearing about that first time, well, there's many proofs that, let's see, do I have that real quick? No, I don't see it over here on the list. Not the list that I have pulled up to use here. But if you've stuck around and watched a few of the videos, I show you great detail of their practice, or just go in the description box below in the 1611 preface. Watch that video. The translators call Gregory the divine, and yet they have deceived you. For your reward for studying the Bible is just to have a fellowship with the saints, and not to enter into heaven, not to know our Creator exists. Now, in other texts, I had the word storehouses, and I think I'm going to change them all to storerooms. And I need to check that out before I go to the next video. But you'll see that I'm still deciding, because they weren't really houses. So storerooms is what I'm going to use, I guess. But let me see here. The surrounding lands, I had to add the word surrounding. And then there was no food at that time in Egypt. And then they cried out to him. And it's not bread. They didn't have bread in the storerooms. They had food in the storerooms, other produce that you could use as dried out and store. In fact, if they stored it in the ground, they could keep like a root vegetable longer that way, buried in the ground. See, I'm changing their word. They used storehouses, and I just don't like that. It's not a true enough meaning when I'm using the word houses for I'm using the word home, and then I'm using the word house, and the house would have servants. It's a bigger place, okay? Go to travel. I don't think that's difficult to understand why I changed that. and people around them. I needed that to tell you who they are that are coming there, to the people of the land. And it would have been outside Egypt that they're selling to, is what this verse is saying. Because Joseph was in command of selling to those people that came in. That's why his brothers came to him, because they could have went to any other storehouse or storeroom. But the object is they had to come all the way into Cairo to buy, and that's how they met up. They couldn't, so he was keeping track of what was going out, but he had other storerooms in other cities for them to buy from. So, and here it's he disguised himself to them. Well, I had to put the word Egyptian here because I was speaking in Egyptian, and that's because later we'll find there's a translator between him. But when I'm reading that, I need to have, well, how'd they disguise him that they wouldn't know him? I mean, if he was speaking in Hebrew to them, they would, kind of like, how can this guy do it? And then maybe think about it and say, well, we sold him to Egypt, So, but for them to disguise himself, he was talking to them in Egyptian, and that's how he disguised what this disguise is. And to put the words what spies are doing here, the undefended parts that are not guarded in our land, that's what that's what he's claiming they've done. And then I had to change this here out, that is spying out, to refer to what I was just saying there, was the unguarded land that they were spying out. Where is the unguarded land at? Like I said, yellow is being added, so I don't think that's too hard to find why I'm adding them right here and there. Now here I am changing 1 to 9. The story, I couldn't, he didn't put them all together in prison. He put one into prison, and then he sent the other 9 home so they could return. So that's why I had to put 9 here, 1 up here, and not all of them together. So I guess the word 1 was actually being added. And they weren't guilty, they were punished. They wouldn't be saying we are guilty. We are now being punished by him taking Judah and putting him into prison. And here's the word interpreter now for him. They did not know Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter. So I put it up there that he was speaking in Egyptian, but he could understand them. Picked Judah and bound him. Remember, Judah is the one that talked his brothers into saying, let's sell him then. Now here, money in his sack to give them, and give them water, not provisions, but water to go back. The provisions would have been also maybe dried meats and stuff, but I think if they're traveling, they would have brought the dried meats and fish. It wasn't that far to come down, I don't think. It was that far. I mean, as far as, yeah, it's a long way. Don't get me that. Let me see, how many miles do I have that they... Okay, so it's about 200 miles, maybe 300 miles from where they had to travel. And remember, traveling at that time, especially if you know you're traveling, you're moving all day long, and to travel 40 to 50 miles a day is not that much. So um, there is no number in the text that actually gives us a hint, but let me get on with it here. This verse here I've had to add and into their sacks. Okay, I think I've changed that word later. I need to put that on that list as well, because that isn't what I called them later. Their feed sack, because the problem here is here when they're talking about opened his sack to give his donkey. Well, they wouldn't have given it to him out of the other sacks. They didn't. The animals could smell it, but the object is they knew when they went to a certain sack that they were going to get food. So the thing here is opened his feed sack. This would be feed sack, and I believe I changed it in the others. So let me put it here. So I'll put them in here now. Okay, I think they're in the right place now. Because it just can't be their sacks. I mean, what they're going to feed their animals, their donkeys, so it has to be feed sack. And they're still using the word Jacob instead of Israel. Our Creator's already changed his name, so it should not be anymore in the text. And he's going to put him in jail. Probably the same jail where he was put. Return, I don't think that's too difficult. And then it's at the top of their sack. I don't know if I set it up here. Yeah, it was they had mouth. And I didn't like the word mouth, so I changed it to the top of his sack, the feed sack. So I kept with the word top here of his feed sack. And Judah was no more. He was taken from us. This is Israel speaking. Now this is where I am putting influence on the text itself and changing it to acts instead of things. I know the things are, could mean acts, but it's just such a different type of meaning to the verse. I just want to let you know that, yes, I'm adding this word, and yes, I know I did put my influence on the text. Not that I'm not doing it in other places, but that is one that's really extreme that I did. I felt that it was extreme. You're saying probably he did half this thing all on his own. You're going to see when the text in the next video starts looking without all this junk in it, how beautiful the text really is. And like I said before, this verse is the verse that goes here, believe it or not, is right here. And all this stuff, they divided it out, but they left it in to continue the story somebody just had to make sure that they had another story in between there. So, anyways, water and cloths, because Jesus had a towel around his, or stuck in his, around his rope on his waist to dry the disciples' feet. So I knew that the word cloth would be a really good word to put here to complete the two major words to make a verse. And then they say he's old. I've added the word old. Father is, but well and alive. He is old, but he's well and alive. Here, I'm adding the word moved instead of stirred. So that, I think, is a better description than the word stirred, even though that would have double meaning. I'm trying to make sure that when I do use the word stirred, it means stirring pot, okay? So to use the word moved, yes, this is going to be one of those multiple words, trying to cut them all down to the meaning, only what they mean. I think there's now 7 words that I can think of now that have a double meaning, like left arm. Now he sat by himself. I could have said this is a major word, which it is, but I'm going to say these are the 2 major words that I needed to add, both of them. And they were shocked and wonder. Now he is probably, that's because they were seated in their birth order, according to their birth. That they ate and drank with them. All this is not necessary. It's just a story being told that has nothing to really do with it. Because now, if the funny thing is the text picks up as if it was added, okay? And that's the strange thing about some of this text, because later, none of this text needs to that other whole formats. You'll find that I'm only going to do probably about 20 verses out of maybe, 300 that are, well, groups, I guess. Maybe I'm going to change about 20 groups out of, say, 400 groups of these words to be moved into correct place. So, and I know this isn't going to get moved around, so you'll read it and you won't even remember that this text was there. So it's just strange to see how they did stick text in to do what they did to the text, to write it for their own God. And like I said, the 1611 preface video below, once you hear me say those words, you know that the bad guy, the atheists, are editing your text. We're editing the text. And it goes back, way back to a king before there was, I think, Manasseh. And the text actually says that he made his own idol of the female goddess and stuck her into our Creator's house. And the priests were corrupt. If they did that, they were doing that too. So they've had 2,000 years, easy on me, 2,000, maybe 300 years that they've been playing with the text. And a lot of them knew at that time too. Say all this. Could I find a 3-verse format in here? Probably, but I don't want to. But it would be that's because the story doesn't mean anything to influence anything in the text, except that it would be corruption. So I'm taking that out. Dismayed to shocked by his presence, and that's probably because he started speaking in Hebrew, but they weren't dismayed, they were shocked, okay? And let's see here. Yeah, this video is not gonna be 40 minutes. I should have talked longer on some things, but look, there's things that I've said so many times over and over. You understand why I'm adding. Example, the word Lord, that is the correct title at this time to be adding. Okay, not our Creator, but our Lord. And the title for Lord means like a direct overseer of a people. Um, like Abraham was a lord of everybody that worked for him. That type of a title. Over the produce, not over all the land. They had that a couple places that they said that he was over all the land, and he was over the produce. All foods, all in Egypt, made me Lord of all in Egypt, or Lord of all Egypt, and that's wrong. That is definitely oversalted there, because the king was higher than he was, and he was probably equal to the other lords that he had assigned. A lord over the army, a lord over his treasury, a lord over the ambassadors of people that come see him. Here I'm using this place that he's saying that they're going to be near him. This is a location, if you look it up, is by where the Nile River turns into like 4 or 5 rivers at the end. That area is very fertile, has a lot of green involved. I mean, when you take a look at the satellite view of it, you'll see that's really green around there. But really, they came to Cairo. Now, I just showed you this image here. In this image, it has On as being the capital. And then from this name they had in the Bible, then it changed to this word. I'm just going to start off by putting it right in here as Cairo. And everybody knows that is where the hub of Pharaoh was at. Or not Pharaoh. The king of Egypt lived, was in Cairo. That is my influence putting on the text, and it's the most recent word that we're using in today's language that I am putting into the text. And adding the word Egypt, that Joseph sent them to bring to Egypt. And Israel was happy, not relieved, but he was happy. Because later down here, I think he's going to comment to him when he meets him. And this shouldn't have been highlighted anymore. And here it's our Creator's given him a vision again, and just reminding him of the promise to you. Remember, I promised you. And these things that he's going to talk about here is the promise that he gave him. But he's rather old. You notice I had to add the word old when he asked his brothers, how about his father? He was old. I had to add that, and well, but can't remember the rest of the words I'm trying to read. Too many things going on this little head up here. But the most important parts, I hope I'm not messing up, is when I'm telling you that, like this, when it says little ones are actually children. They don't need to be described like this. We'll put them as children, try to make the text as reading in first person, because when it's in first person, it does read quite well. And here they went to Joseph, and we know we're in Memphis, or not Memphis, but in Cairo is where they went. This tells us how many people came. And then when they did meet, Israel told them, now I can die because I've seen you face to face to know you are alive. Needed those 2 words to complete a 3-verse grouping. And then, and then it goes on that he is going to provide for his father and brothers. So none of this about visiting the king of Egypt, introduce him, doesn't matter. And now this group popped up in here, and I'm going to end up moving it to the very end, because this is now the Israelis lived by Goshen, or the rivers. And this is meaning when Egypt turns into, I think it's more than five rivers or something that breaks into before it goes into the Mediterranean. But you can see here, then the time for Israel to die, he called Joseph. So they have to be living close together. It wouldn't be that far away. Not to bury him in the land of Egypt, but in the cave, and take my bones out and bury him in our burial place. And here, this text is going to be talking about that he does that, but I'm not going to put any of that text in it. It is not important that they did or did not. The most important parts I'm trying to keep are our Creator's everlasting promises. Once you understand his everlasting promises, you then know why some will enter into heaven. And then now here, Joseph dies at the age of 70 years old. And then down here will be the Israels moved to the rivers, and then they multiplied from there. Okay. Now that was a short video, but it got to the end. Now the next text I'm going to show you is going to be cleaned up without all this blue, and you're going to see the formats now just singing out loud to you. So I guess this is the end here.